plays. So it's a pretty good sized park. It's got a real, baseball diamond in there, and those lights are pretty bright. But this was pretty late, and so it seemed pretty unlikely that was actually it, And so he said that at first he joked about it. Maybe it's a UFO, but he's like, it's probably just the baseball lights they have them on for some reason. But, just to be sure, they decided that they were going to walk down the side of the apartment building and see if they could see the lights from the park. And so they get down to the parking lot. And that's when Francis says that he really started to feel like something was wrong. And, they look up and they see circling above them was this perfect bright white light that he said had this sort of reflective metal right in the middle of it. And so they look at this light briefly, and, they're scared. They really didn't want anything to do with it. It seemed very unnatural, and they were terrified. So they take off running back to her apartment, and Francis told me how they grabbed the railing. If you can picture sort of stairs going up the side of this apartment building, and they grabbed the railing to run faster. Taking the steps 2 or 3 at a time, and that's the last thing he remembers. And after that, he said his next memory, and this is when the jarred memories start coming back in. So previously, that was as much of the incident as he remembered, and then he just woke up the next morning, and that was it. After the concussion, he remembers trying to wake up as though, he was sort of in a fog or dream state. And he said that he knew he was under something, almost like some kind of anesthetic. And so he said that in this state, he felt like, he's lying down and he's struggling to stay awake, and so he's lying there, and he said that there were these smaller beings with these big black almond-shaped eyes and pale skin, and behind them were other beings who were much taller, but otherwise looked basically the same.
Okay. Now, hey, Tobias, I'm going to have to put you on hold for 3 minutes. I got a couple commercials we got to do. So I'm going to put you on hold. Don't hang up. Go get a cup of coffee. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and we'll find more out about this story. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on My Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
And we are back with Tobias. I hope you're there, but Tobias, how you doing tonight?
Good. Yeah, I'm definitely still here.
You never know. Sometimes I actually had a guest here a couple of weeks ago that fell asleep.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
That is mortifying.
It scared me. I didn't know what happened. So, I mean, what do you do when you have a guest? I mean, we went on I guess, too, depending on what part of the country it is, it gets late.
I guess. I mean, I'm 2 hours ahead of you, so it's 9 to 11 here, but it's a Friday night, so that's not too late. I'm just wondering, like, was there any indication when you're talking to this guy that he was gonna fall asleep? And how do you fall asleep during like a 3-minute commercial break?
I don't know. I guess it depends on your age and how many hours you work and how many hours you've been up. I'll be honest with you. I almost one time fell asleep doing a show. And I'm not going to say why, but I was struggling. This is when I was back doing, before my injury, I was doing 2-hour shows, and I think was into it for an hour and a half, and I was really tired. And I tell you, it was a couple of times like I just closed my eyes, and I thank God I didn't nod out.
Oh man, yeah. I guess like I've maybe I've been that tired before. That's sort of my worst nightmare. I always make sure, even if I feel wide awake, like right now, I've got what Emily describes as a bowl, but I think it's a mug because it has a handle. And I've got like 2 packets of tea in there, and it's like the higher caffeine tea. So, I want to make sure that I'm present the entire time. I'm not going to be falling asleep or anything.
Well, a lot has to do with your age, too. If you're interviewing somebody in their 70s, that has a big effect compared to somebody in their 30s and 40s.
Right. Yeah, no, fair enough.
Now, do we want to go on from where you were, or do you have another story? What do you want to, where you want to take it?
I'll just pick up where I left off with Francis's story, and then we can just kind of go from there. So we left off with, Francis in this sort of anesthetized state after seeing this glowing craft overhead and fleeing. Next thing he remembers is, he's lying down and he's surrounded by these small beings with big black almond-shaped eyes and pale skin, and then taller beings of the same appearance behind them who seem to be supervising. And he said that these small beings appeared to be performing some type of procedure on him. And he also said that they seemed to communicate telepathically. And he said that he was able to understand their communication with each other, and that it felt sort of like it was a privilege for him to be able to understand them. Although, I'm not even sure privilege is the right word, because it was more of a fluke, really, because these things, whatever they were, whoever they were, as soon as they realized he was awake, it was pretty clear that he wasn't supposed to be awake. And so this seemed to be a real issue for these things. And, he's terrified, meanwhile. And, he asked him, he's just like, hey, could you please turn this fear off in me, because he's so terrified. He doesn't know what else to do. And again, he's sort of in this dreamlike state, so I don't even know if he fully comprehends what is happening to him in this moment. And then after he asks that, this sort of peaceful feeling comes over comes over him, and he asks them, like, why are you doing this? And he said that they responded that it's necessary, that it's necessary for the human race, and they didn't say anything else beyond that. And he told me, honestly, like, that wasn't necessarily everything he remembered about his experience. But again, just like that, that was everything he wanted to talk about, because there were aspects of this abduction scenario and his interaction, with these things that were, too frightening for him to talk about 10 years later. And he said that he woke up and, he knew he had seen this light. The woman he was with had seen the same light. And he wasn't, at first, maybe he wasn't sure about the actual abduction experience itself, but he noticed that he had this mark on top of his bicep that was 3 red circles in a triangle. And he said that he'd also removed a thin, maybe, this would be pretty sizable, actually, like 2-inch piece of metal from his ear. And he said that it was squishy, but that it always went back to its original shape. And so, that got me pretty interested, obviously. But, he said that he had given it to somebody for safekeeping. And honestly, I was never able to track it down after that. So who knows? But the story itself is fairly consistent with others that I've heard, although there was one from a young woman in Janesville, Wisconsin, who she actually described something during her abduction that, if it really was an abduction, because hers she may have actually foiled hers, that I had never heard before, and I'm fairly certain that a lot of people listening probably have never heard of something in this story too. So
no, you got my curiosity up.
Yeah. So this young woman, again, she lived in Janesville, Wisconsin, and this was relatively recent, actually. This attempted abduction, we'll say, occurred, in her home during the spring of 2018. So this was just over a year ago. She was 21, and she had just fallen asleep on the couch in her living room when she was awoken in the middle of the night by this bright light. And so this light wakes her up, and, it wakes her up very suddenly. It's the middle of the night, and it's shining through this narrow window on her front door. And so the couch on which she had fallen asleep, it faces the front door, but the door itself is blocked from her view by this wall. So basically anybody entering the home through the front door, they would need to turn immediately to the right and go